The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the polished mahogany table as I smoothed the fabric of my borrowed green dress. The silk felt foreign against my skin, a reminder that I didn't quite belong in this world of wealth and privilege. 23 guests filled the dining room of the Blackwell estate, their voices creating a gentle murmur that seemed to echo off the oil paintings lining the walls. I had been dating Marcus Blackwell for 18 months now, long enough to understand the weight his family name carried in this city, long enough to know that his father, William Blackwell, viewed me as nothing more than an obstacle to his son's destined path. The billionaire's empire had been built on steel and determination, and he expected his only heir to marry within their social circle. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of the Blackwell Foundation's latest charitable contribution. The guest list read like a who's who of the city's elite, each person carefully selected for their influence and wealth. I had spent weeks preparing for this evening, knowing that my presence would be scrutinized by every person in the room. Marcus squeezed my hand gently as we took our seats at the long table. His warm brown eyes met mine, offering silent reassurance. At 28, he possessed his father's sharp intelligence, but had inherited his late mother's kind heart. He had warned me that tonight might be difficult, but neither of us had anticipated just how ruthless his father could be. The first course arrived with elegant precision, servers moving like ghosts between the guests. Conversation flowed around topics I recognized, but couldn't fully participate in private jets. European estates and business deals worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. I listened carefully, contributing when appropriate, trying to prove that I belonged at this table despite my modest background. William Blackwell sat at the head of the table, like a king holding court. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his navy suit impeccably tailored. At 62, he commanded attention without saying a word, his presence filling the room with an almost palpable authority. Throughout the evening, I caught him watching me, his pale blue eyes calculating and cold. The conversation gradually shifted to more personal matters as the wine loosened tongues and lowered inhibitions. Mrs. Harrison, a socialite with too much jewelry and too little kindness, began sharing neighborhood gossip. Mr. Pemberton, who owned half the city's real estate, told stories about his recent art acquisitions. It was during the third course that William Blackwell cleared his throat, commanding immediate silence from every person at the table. The soft clinking of silverware against china ceased, and all eyes turned toward him. "I have something to share with our guests tonight," he began, his voice carrying the same authority he used in boardrooms. "Something that I believe everyone should know about the young woman my son has chosen to bring into our home." My blood turned to ice as his cruel eyes locked with mine. Marcus tensed beside me, his hand finding mine under the table. I could feel the attention of 23 elite guests focused on me like a spotlight, and I knew that whatever was coming would change everything. "You see," William continued, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I've recently learned some very interesting information about Miss Charlotte's activities when she's not gracing us with her presence." He pulled out a manila envelope and began removing photographs, laying them on the table with deliberate precision. Each image showed me in different locations around the city, always with a man, always appearing engaged in intense conversation. "Here, we have Charlotte at the downtown library," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "And here she is at that little cafe on Maple Street." Notice how intimate these conversations appeared to be. The photographs continued, a trail of evidence that painted a picture of infidelity and deception. I could hear the sharp intake of breath from Mrs. Harrison, the disapproving murmur from Mr. Pemberton, the billionaire's cruel eyes locked with mine, savoring my public humiliation as he continued his character assassination. "Street garbage. In a borrowed dress," he sneered, his voice carrying across the silent dining room. 23 elite guests held their breath, witnessing my destruction. Marcus started to stand, his face flushed with anger, but I placed a gentle hand on his arm. My heart was pounding so hard I was certain everyone could hear it, but slowly, very slowly, I began to smile. The expression seemed to surprise William Blackwell, who had clearly expected tears or a hasty exit. I rose from my chair with deliberate grace, my borrowed green dress catching the chandelier light. The room remained absolutely silent as I reached into my small evening purse and withdrew a single folded document. "Thank you for sharing those photographs, Mr. Blackwell," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "They perfectly document my investigation into your business practices." The change in the room's atmosphere was immediate and electric. William's confident smirk began to falter as I unfolded the document and placed it on the table where everyone could see. "The first man in your photographs is Detective Raymond Torres from the Financial Crimes Division," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "The second is Thomas Mitchell from the Securities and Exchange Commission. The third is investigative journalist David Chen from the Wall Street Journal." The color drained from William Blackwell's face as the implications of my words settled over the room. These weren't secret lovers or evidence of my unfaithfulness. They were witnesses to something far more damaging. "For the past 6 months, I've been providing evidence of your illegal offshore accounts and tax evasion schemes," I said, looking directly at the man who had just tried to destroy me in front of his peers. "Turns out, dating your son gave me access to information that law enforcement has been seeking for years." The silence in the room was deafening. Mrs. Harrison's jewelry clinked softly as her hands trembled. Mr. Pemberton had gone pale, perhaps wondering about his own business dealings with the Blackwell Empire. Marcus stared at me with a mixture of shock and admiration that I would never forget. I picked up one of William's photographs and examined it casually. "This particular meeting was when I handed over copies of your Cayman Islands banking records," I explained. "And this one was when I provided documentation of the shell companies you used to avoid paying taxes." William Blackwell, the man who had built an empire through ruthless determination, sat frozen in his chair. The power he had wielded so confidently just minutes before had evaporated like morning mist. "The investigation goes public tomorrow morning," I said, folding the document and returning it to my purse. "Your empire, Mr. Blackwell, is about to fall with a whisper." I looked around the table at the 23 guests who had witnessed this exchange, knowing that by tomorrow evening, the story would be the talk of every social gathering in the city. Marcus stood beside me, his hand finding mine. "Charlotte," he whispered, "why didn't you tell me?" I turned to him, seeing the man I loved looking at me with new understanding. "Because this wasn't about us," I said softly. "This was about justice." As we walked out of that dining room together, leaving behind the stunned silence and the wreckage of William Blackwell's carefully constructed evening, I realized that sometimes the most powerful weapon against cruelty isn't fighting back with the same tactics. Sometimes empires fall with nothing more than the truth, spoken quietly by someone they underestimated.